Hi guys, Ron here from Tactical Fitness, and today we're going to talk about our shooting stance or our combat stance. This is our base for all shooting and really any combat, so hand-to-hand or shooting, it's going to be the same stance. We want to make sure that it's a stance that allows us to be very stable when we're shooting and absorb recoil, as well as be able to move quickly into position and out of position. So our stance looks like so. I'm going to take my non-dominant foot forward. I'm going to have my feet flat. I'm going to soften my knees, and I'm going to lean my shoulders slightly in front of the hips. So my weight is slightly in front of my hips to absorb that recoil that's coming back at me from the handgun. Again, my feet are about shoulder width apart, toes forward, knees forward, hips forward, and shoulders leaning forward as well. I should feel my core working slightly here. Quads are engaged. And from here, I can turn directions quickly. I can throw punches. I can shoot. Next up, we're going to talk about the handgun grip. Let's break it down. So anytime I grab my handgun, I'm going to wrap my 3 fingers around. I'm going to have my index finger straight, well above the trigger guard. I want to make sure that I have my grip set as a firm handshake. I want to make sure that my pinky finger is nice and tight. That's my furthest lever from the recoil. And then I want to make sure that my grip is aligned properly with the handgun, or my handgun is aligned properly with my grip. So we're going to do 2 checks. Number 1, we're going to check our front sight and our rear sight. We're going to make sure that it is aligned with the radius bone. Second check we're going to do is checking our length of pull. So we're going to grab that gun. I want to make sure that my trigger finger has the right distance to the trigger. So how are we going to check that? I'm going to place my trigger finger on the trigger. If I'm placing it there and it's sitting perfectly with the center of that first pad on top of the trigger, then I have a good length of pull. If not, for example, if that grip is too big for me, I can barely reach that trigger, I'm going to cause motion in my gun as I press the trigger, or vice versa. If that grip is too small for me and I'm hooking that trigger and I'm ending up pulling it to the side, you can adjust this either by changing the back straps on your handgun or simply using grip tape like hockey grip tape or something similar to that. So that's the grip on my strong hand. Let's break down our support hand. I have this big gap here that I want to fill with my support hand. I'm going to take the index finger, I'm going to take the knuckle of the index finger and match it up with the middle finger of my strong hand. I'm going to roll my hand into that big gap that's left here, and I'm going to take the chicken leg part of my thumb and place it into the big gap that's created here. I'm going to create tension up into the gun and into the gun to the side. So this is my master grip. My thumb is going to be about the same length forward as my index finger on that support hand. And then from here, I simply present that firearm forward. My elbows are going to be slightly bent and flat out to the side to create more tension into the gun. And I'm going to present that gun up towards my dominant eye. Next up, we're going to talk about aiming, essentially our sight picture and our sight alignment. So let's learn how to aim. We have 2 aiming systems on most handguns nowadays. We either have our backup iron sights or we have some type of electro-optic like a red dot, like this Holosun optic. Let's talk first about our iron sights. We're essentially dealing with 3 focal points. So we're going to first talk about how to align our sights. We have our target, we have the front sight, we have the rear sight. We're going to align that front sight post inside the rear sight, and whatever we're aiming at, we're going to cover with that front sight. So that's our sight alignment. Okay? The front sight will be equal height to the rear sight, and it will be centered inside that rear sight. That's our sight alignment. Let's talk about our sight picture. Because our sights cannot focus on multiple depths, or our eyes cannot focus on multiple depths at once, so our target will look a little bit blurry, our front sight should be crystal clear, and our rear sight should be a little bit blurry, and that's our sight picture. Now, as soon as I fire, my sight picture will skew a little bit, so I want to make sure that I realign my sights and reacquire my sight picture and my sight alignment. Those of you that are running any type of red dot, your life will be a lot easier. You'll be dealing with one focal plane, which also will work a lot easier with how your eyes work under stress. So we're going to stay target focused, and we're going to superimpose that dot on whatever we're aiming. So we're going to make sure that we present that dot right in front of our dominant eye. We're going to look at the target, and that's our sight picture. The dot is simply centered in the window and on our target. Once we've fired, that sight will move. The dot will move because it is attached to my slide. And I want to make sure that I keep looking at my target and let that dot fall back in front of my eye. So bang, reacquire that sight picture and get that follow through. So for every round I fire, I have a sight picture before I fire and a sight picture after I fire. side picture, bang, side picture, bang, side picture. Those of you that are running red dot, it's especially important to treat it as a red dot and not as a front sight on your gun. So you're going to make sure that you stay focused on the target and don't try to look for that dot. Just let the dot fall back in front of your eye. We got into a good stance. We got a good grip on our gun. We aimed. Now it's time to press the trigger. So let's break down our trigger press. Whenever we're pressing the trigger, we want to make sure we do it in a uniform fashion, straight back to the rear without inducing any type of motion into our gun. Essentially, when we break down shooting, it's pressing the trigger without moving the sights. It doesn't matter how tactical I get. That's what I'm going to be doing at the end. It's pressing the trigger without moving the sights. So let's break that down. We talked about it earlier with our grip. We want to make sure we use the center of that first pad and place it on the center of the trigger. Now, most of your striker fire type handguns are going to have some slack in that trigger, and then we're going to hit a wall and then the trigger will break. We want to make sure that we perform this in a uniform fashion, straight back to the rear, again without inducing any type of movement in our sights. Now, triggers will vary, trigger pressures will vary. Again, the most important part is cutting the slack, pressing straight back without any movement. All together, it looks like so. My sight is on target. I either press the trigger straight back. Now, if I want to continue shooting and I want to be efficient in my motion in my trigger finger, inducing less movement in the gun, I want to make sure that after I press that trigger, I only release that trigger back to the wall. Now, I don't need to pin the trigger, wait for the gun to cycle, and then release it. I'm going to press the trigger and only release it back to that wall. As long as my grip is in position, I can be pressing the trigger hard, I can be pressing it lightly, and the gun will not move. Next up, we're going to talk about how to properly rack our slide when manipulating our handgun. So our racking motion looks like so. There's essentially two methods to racking the slide. One is called the cupping method, where I'm using the 4 fingers and my palm, grabbing the rear slide serration on my slide and punching the gun forward. And the other method is called the slingshot method, where I'm essentially using my thumb and knuckle like I'm holding a cigarette lighter. Some people call it the Israeli method, where I'm tilting my gun over and racking in this fashion. I believe that the cupping method is a superior method, gives me a little bit more grip, but if you're a left-handed shooter, you may find the slingshot method a little bit better. In any case, both methods, I'm actually not pulling the slide, I'm pushing the gun forward. So my support hand, my racking hand, is actually staying in place, and my strong hand, my shooting hand, is pushing forward. This does two things for me. One, it's easier physically, it's easier for me to punch the gun forward. Number two, if I'm fixing a malfunction, it gets me on target much quicker. Or should I just do 5 and 5 and 5? Hey guys, thank you for watching. For more information, check us out at tacticalfitnessaustin.com. You can see all of our upcoming handgun courses like Handgun Fundamentals, Urban Handgun, Family Protector, and of course, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get our free handgun and rifle dry fire program.